I found my niece sleeping alone upstairs while my sister partied at a wedding. When I called security, my entire family turned against me. What happened next proved I was right all along. I need some perspective on what happened at my cousin's wedding last weekend. I'm Andrew, 28M, and this involves my sister Becky, 32F, and her daughter Aurora, 8F. For context, my family has always been close-knit. Becky and I grew up together, and even though we had our typical sibling fights, we've maintained a decent relationship as adults. She got married young at 22 to her husband Tom, 35M, and they had Aurora when Becky was 24. Tom works in construction and travels frequently for projects, so Becky often handles most of the parenting duties alone. Becky has always been the type of person who needs constant social interaction. Even back in high school, she couldn't stand being alone and always had to be surrounded by friends. After Aurora was born, I noticed she struggled with the isolation that comes with being a new mom. She would often drop Aurora off at our parents' house for entire weekends, claiming she needed a break. Our parents, being the doting grandparents they are, never complained and were happy to help. Over the years, I've noticed some concerning patterns with how Becky handles her responsibilities as a mother. She would frequently show up to family gatherings late because she forgot she was supposed to bring Aurora, or she would leave Aurora with whoever was available while she went off to socialize. Our parents and other family members always stepped in, so Aurora never seemed to suffer for it. Aurora is a sweet, well-behaved kid who has learned to be quite independent for her age. The wedding in question was for our cousin Sarah, 26F, who was marrying her longtime boyfriend at a beautiful vineyard venue about 2 hours from our hometown. Sarah had specifically requested that this be an adults-only celebration, but she made an exception for the immediate family's children, which included Aurora and 2 other young cousins. The venue was quite large, with the ceremony area, reception hall, and several outdoor spaces spread across the property. Becky had been talking about this wedding for months. She bought a new dress, got her hair done professionally, and seemed more excited about this event than I had seen her in years. Tom couldn't attend because he was working on a project in another state, so Becky was flying solo with Aurora. The day of the wedding started normally enough. The ceremony was beautiful, and Aurora sat quietly between Becky and our mom during the service. After the ceremony, we had cocktail hour in the garden area while the bridal party took photos. This is where things started to go sideways. During cocktail hour, Becky immediately gravitated toward a group of our college friends who had also been invited. These were people she hadn't seen in years, and she was clearly thrilled to reconnect with them. Aurora stayed close to our parents initially, but after about 30 minutes, I noticed she was wandering around the garden area by herself while Becky was deep in conversation and laughter with her old friends. I didn't think much of it at first. The venue seemed safe enough, and there were plenty of family members around. However, as cocktail hour progressed, I noticed that Becky hadn't checked on Aurora once. She was completely absorbed in catching up with everyone and seemed to have forgotten that her daughter was even there. When we moved into the reception hall for dinner, I assumed Becky would collect Aurora and they would sit together at our assigned family table. Instead, Becky asked our mom if Aurora could sit with her and our dad so that Becky could sit with her college friends at a different table. Our mom agreed, as she always does, and Aurora ended up at the grandparents' table while Becky moved to a table across the room. During dinner, Becky was animated and loud, clearly having the time of her life. She was drinking wine, laughing constantly, and taking numerous photos with her friends. Meanwhile, Aurora sat quietly with our elderly grandparents, picking at her chicken and looking around the room. I was at the head table as part of the wedding party, so I couldn't really intervene, but I kept glancing over at both of them throughout the meal. After dinner, the dancing began. The DJ started with some slower songs for the older guests, then gradually moved into more upbeat music. Becky was one of the first people on the dance floor, and she stayed there for the next 2 hours straight. She was dancing with various friends, taking group photos, and generally living it up. During this entire time, Aurora was sitting alone at the now empty grandparents' table because our elderly grandparents had retired to their hotel room for the evening. I checked on Aurora a few times during the dancing. She seemed tired but said she was okay when I asked. I offered to take her to find Becky, but she just shrugged and said her mom was having fun. This response bothered me more than I can explain. An 8-year-old shouldn't be so resigned to being ignored by her parent. Around 10 p.m., I noticed that Aurora was no longer at the table. I looked around the reception hall but couldn't see her anywhere. I checked the bathroom, the lobby area, and even went outside to look around the gardens. After about 15 minutes of searching, I started to panic. The venue was large and had multiple levels, plus it was completely dark outside by then. I finally found Aurora in a small lounge area on the second floor of the venue. She was curled up on a couch, fast asleep. She had apparently wandered upstairs looking for a quiet place to rest and had fallen asleep alone. The lounge area was completely empty and dimly lit. Anyone could have walked in there. When I found her, I immediately went to look for Becky. She was still on the dance floor, now with her shoes off, dancing to some pop song with her college friends. She was clearly intoxicated, though not falling down drunk. When I approached her and told her I needed to talk to her about Aurora, she waved me off and said she would catch up with me later. I had to physically take her arm and pull her aside to get her attention. When I told her that Aurora had been sleeping alone upstairs and that I had been looking for her for 20 minutes, Becky's response was to laugh and say that Aurora was fine and knew how to take care of herself. She then tried to pull me onto the dance floor with her. I told Becky that she needed to go get Aurora and figure out sleeping arrangements for the night. We were all staying at the same hotel about 10 minutes from the venue, and it was already past 10:30 p.m. Becky told me that Aurora could sleep in the hotel room while she stayed at the wedding until it ended. She planned to get a ride back with one of her friends later. This is when I lost my patience. I told Becky that she couldn't leave an 8-year-old alone in a hotel room while she partied until 2 a.m. Becky got defensive and said that Aurora had stayed alone before and that I was being overdramatic. She said Aurora would be fine for a few hours and that she deserved to have fun for once. When I realized Becky wasn't going to listen to reason, I went to find venue security. I explained the situation to the head of security, a professional-looking woman in her 40s. I told her that there was an 8-year-old child who had been left unattended by her parent, and that the parent was planning to leave the child alone in a hotel room while she continued drinking at the wedding. The security officer took the situation seriously and asked me to show her where Aurora was sleeping. When we got upstairs, Aurora was still curled up on the couch, completely dead to the world. The security officer took photos for documentation and then asked me to bring her to the parent in question. When we approached Becky on the dance floor, the security officer identified herself and asked to speak with Becky privately. Becky immediately became belligerent, asking why security was bothering her and what business it was of theirs. The security officer explained that leaving a child unattended at a venue and planning to leave that child alone in a hotel room could constitute child endangerment. Becky turned on me and started yelling that I was trying to ruin her night and that I had no right to call security on her. She said I didn't understand what it was like being a single parent most of the time and that she was entitled to have fun. Several other wedding guests stopped dancing and started staring at the commotion. The security officer remained calm and professional. She explained that the venue had a policy about unattended minors and that they were required to report situations like this to local authorities if the parent refused to take responsibility. She gave Becky the option to either make appropriate arrangements for Aurora's care or face having the situation reported to police. At this point, our parents appeared, having been alerted by other family members about the disturbance. Our mom immediately went to collect Aurora from upstairs while our dad tried to mediate the situation with Becky and the security officer. Becky was now crying and accusing everyone of ganging up on her and ruining the best night she'd had in years. The security officer agreed not to file a report as long as Aurora was placed in the care of responsible adults for the remainder of the evening. Our parents agreed to take Aurora back to their hotel room, and Becky was allowed to stay at the wedding. However, the damage was done. The entire family was now aware of what had happened, and the mood was completely ruined. Becky ended up leaving the wedding about an hour later, but not before confronting me again and accusing me of humiliating her in front of everyone. She said I had overreacted and that calling security was extreme and unnecessary. She claimed that Aurora was never in any real danger and that I had made the situation seem worse than it was. The rest of the family has been divided on whether I did the right thing. Our parents think I overreacted and should have just handled it within the family. Some cousins agree with me that Becky was being irresponsible, while others think I embarrassed her unnecessarily. Even the bride, Sarah, later told me she wished I had found a way to handle it more discreetly since it disrupted her wedding. Aurora ended up sleeping in our parents' hotel room that night, and Becky picked her up the next morning to drive home. Becky has been giving me the silent treatment ever since, and she's told other family members that I betrayed her and made her look like a bad mother in front of everyone. I keep second-guessing myself. Maybe I should have just taken Aurora back to the hotel myself instead of involving security. Maybe I should have been more patient with Becky and tried harder to make her understand the situation. But I also can't shake the image of Aurora sleeping alone upstairs while her mother partied downstairs, completely oblivious to where her child was. Ida for calling security on my sister instead of handling this situation within the family? Update 1. I wasn't planning to update this post, but some things have happened that I think people who commented might want to know about. First, thank you to everyone who took the time to respond to my original post. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive, which helped me feel less guilty about how I handled the situation. However, things in my family have gotten much more complicated since then. After the wedding, Becky maintained her silent treatment with me for about 2 weeks. During this time, she was telling other family members her version of events, which was significantly different from what actually happened. According to Becky's story, I had called security on her because Aurora had briefly wandered off during the reception, and I had blown the whole thing out of proportion because I don't have kids and don't understand how parenting works. She was also telling people that the security officer had been rude and aggressive with her, and that I had deliberately tried to humiliate her in front of her college friends whom she rarely gets to see. In her version, Aurora was never actually in any danger, and I had made a mountain out of a molehill because I was jealous that she was having fun. I found out about these alternative facts when my Aunt Linda, 56F, who wasn't at the wedding, called me to ask why I had been so cruel to Becky. Linda explained that Becky had called her crying, saying that I had treated her like an unfit mother and had gotten her in trouble with security for no reason. According to what Becky told Linda, Aurora had been with our parents most of the evening, and I had called security because Aurora went to the bathroom by herself. This phone call made me realize that Becky was actively working to turn the family against me. I decided I needed to set the record straight before her version became the accepted truth. I called a family meeting with my parents, my other Aunt Carol, 52F, and my Uncle Jim, 58M, who had all been at the wedding and witnessed at least part of what happened. During this family meeting, I asked each of them to share what they had actually seen that night. My parents admitted that they had noticed Becky wasn't paying attention to Aurora during the reception, but they said they assumed I or someone else was keeping an eye on her. My Aunt Carol said she had seen Aurora sleeping upstairs and had wondered where Becky was. My Uncle Jim said he had witnessed Becky's confrontation with security and thought Becky had been drinking too much. When I laid out the timeline of events, Aurora sleeping alone upstairs for at least 20 minutes while Becky partied, Becky's plan to leave Aurora alone in a hotel room until 2 a.m., and Becky's refusal to take the situation seriously, my family members started to see the bigger picture. However, their response wasn't what I expected. Instead of being concerned about Becky's behavior, they started talking about how we all needed to support her better. My mom said that Becky had been struggling since Tom started traveling more for work, and that maybe we hadn't been doing enough to help her cope with single parenting. My dad suggested that we should have been more proactive about watching Aurora at the wedding so Becky could enjoy herself. This response frustrated me because it completely missed the point. The issue wasn't that Becky needed help with Aurora, it was that she had abdicated her parental responsibilities entirely and had put Aurora in a potentially dangerous situation. But my family seemed more interested in making excuses for Becky than addressing the real problem. Things came to a head the following week when Becky finally broke her silence with me. She called me and launched into a tirade about how I had ruined her reputation in the family and damaged her relationship with Aurora. She claimed that Aurora had been asking why Uncle Andrew had gotten Mommy in trouble with the police, and that Aurora now thought her mother was a bad person. During this phone call, Becky made several statements that really opened my eyes to how she views her role as a parent. She said that she never gets to have fun anymore because she's always stuck with Aurora while Tom is working. She said that everyone expects her to be the perfect mother 24/7, but nobody appreciates how hard it is for her. She said that one night of letting loose shouldn't define her as a parent, and that I had no right to judge her because I don't have children of my own. What really struck me was when she said that Aurora is old enough to take care of herself for a few hours and that keeping constant watch over an 8-year-old is helicopter parenting. She said that when she was Aurora's age, she was much more independent, and that kids today are too coddled. I tried to explain to Becky that the issue wasn't her wanting to have fun, it was her complete disregard for Aurora's safety and well-being. I pointed out that she hadn't checked on Aurora for over 3 hours, didn't know where Aurora was when I found her sleeping upstairs, and had planned to leave Aurora alone in a hotel room until the early morning hours. But Becky kept deflecting and making it about how hard her life is and how unfairly she's being treated. The conversation ended with Becky telling me that until I apologize for calling security and publicly humiliating her, she doesn't want to have a relationship with me. She said that my actions had consequences and that I needed to live with the fact that I had chosen to side against family. After this conversation, I started paying more attention to Becky's parenting patterns. I began asking other family members about times when Becky had left Aurora with them, and I was shocked by what I learned. Apparently, Becky regularly drops Aurora off at our parents' house with little to no notice, sometimes for entire weekends. She's also left Aurora with various cousins and aunts during family gatherings while she goes off to socialize or run errands. My Aunt Carol told me about a time last summer when Becky had dropped Aurora off for what was supposed to be a few hours so she could go shopping, but then didn't pick Aurora up until the next day. When Carol called to ask where Becky was, Becky said she had decided to stay overnight at a friend's house and hadn't thought to mention it. Aurora had spent the night in clothes she'd been wearing all day because Becky hadn't packed anything for her. My cousin Jennifer, 29F, told me about a family barbecue last spring where Becky had left Aurora at the party and driven to a different city to meet up with some old friends. She didn't come back until the next morning, and Aurora ended up sleeping over at Jennifer's house. Becky's explanation was that she had lost track of time and it was too late to drive back that night. These stories painted a picture of a pattern of behavior that went far beyond what happened at the wedding. It seemed like Becky routinely prioritized her social life over her responsibilities as a mother, and our family had been enabling this behavior by always stepping in to take care of Aurora when Becky disappeared. I also learned that Aurora has been asking our parents if she can live with them permanently. According to my mom, Aurora has said multiple times that she likes staying at Grandma and Grandpa's house better because it's quieter and they pay attention to her. This information broke my heart and made me realize that Aurora has been affected by her mother's behavior much more than any of us realized. The most disturbing revelation came from my Uncle Jim, who told me that he had once found Aurora walking alone in a parking lot outside a restaurant where our family was having dinner. Aurora had gone outside to look for Becky, who had left the restaurant with some friends without telling anyone where she was going. Aurora was only 7 at the time, and she had been wandering around a busy parking lot looking for her mother. Jim brought Aurora back inside and they waited for over an hour before Becky returned. All of these stories made me realize that what happened at the wedding wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a larger pattern of neglect and irresponsibility. Becky has been using our family as unpaid babysitters while she lives her life as if she doesn't have a child, and everyone has been too polite or too conflict-averse to address it directly. The situation has now split our family into 2 camps. My parents, Aunt Linda, and a few cousins think I should apologize to Becky and that we should all work together to support her better. My Aunt Carol, Uncle Jim, Cousin Jennifer, and a few others agree with me that Becky's behavior is problematic and needs to be addressed. Becky is still not speaking to me, and she's been limiting Aurora's contact with the family members who she feels have sided with me. Aurora hasn't been to our parents' house in over 2 weeks, which is unusual because she typically spends every weekend there. I don't regret calling security at the wedding. If anything, learning about Becky's history of behavior has convinced me that I did the right thing. But I'm worried about Aurora and what this family conflict means for her well-being. I'm also struggling with the realization that my family has been enabling neglectful parenting for years without anyone speaking up. Update 2: I need to update you all on what's been happening since my last post, because the situation has escalated in ways I never expected. About a month ago, Aurora's school contacted Becky about Aurora's declining attendance and academic performance. Apparently, Aurora had been late to school multiple times and had missed several full days without proper documentation. When the school tried to discuss this with Becky, she became defensive and blamed the school for being too rigid with their policies. The school counselor had also noticed changes in Aurora's behavior. Aurora had become withdrawn in class and had told her teacher that she often had to take care of herself in the mornings because her mom was tired. The counselor had tried to schedule a meeting with Becky to discuss these concerns, but Becky kept canceling or not showing up. I learned about this from my mom, who had been contacted by the school when they couldn't reach Becky. The school had Aurora's emergency contact information, which included my parents as secondary contacts. When the school called my parents to ask about Aurora's absences, my mom was shocked to learn that Aurora had missed so much school. My parents confronted Becky about this, and Becky's response was to blame everyone else. She said the school was targeting her because they knew she was a single mother. She claimed that Aurora's teacher didn't like her because of what happened at a parent-teacher conference earlier in the year. She said that Aurora was just going through a phase and that everyone was making a big deal out of nothing. What really concerned me was when my mom told me that Becky had said she was considering homeschooling Aurora. Becky claimed that the traditional school system wasn't working for Aurora and that she could provide better education at home. However, Becky works full-time as a receptionist at a dental office and has no teaching experience or qualifications. The idea of Becky homeschooling Aurora while also working full-time seemed completely unrealistic. Around this same time, I started noticing posts on Becky's social media that worried me. She was posting photos from bars and restaurants at all hours of the day and night, often on weekdays. In many of these photos, she was clearly intoxicated and surrounded by friends. What struck me was that these posts were happening on school nights, and there was never any mention of Aurora or any indication that Becky was concerned about getting home to her daughter. I also noticed that Becky had started dating someone new. His name is Marcus, 41M, and based on his social media profiles, he seems to have a history of short-term relationships and a lifestyle that revolves around partying and drinking. Becky started posting photos with Marcus about 3 weeks after our confrontation about the wedding, and they seemed to be spending a lot of time together at bars and clubs. The situation reached a breaking point 3 weeks ago when my parents received a call from Aurora's school saying that Aurora had not been picked up and the school was closing for the day. It was 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, and Aurora had been waiting in the office for over an hour. The school had tried calling Becky multiple times but got no answer. My parents immediately drove to the school to pick up Aurora. When they asked Aurora where she thought her mom was, Aurora just shrugged and said that her mom had probably forgotten. This response was heartbreaking because of how matter-of-fact Aurora was about being forgotten by her mother. My parents took Aurora home with them and continued trying to reach Becky throughout the evening. Becky finally answered her phone at nearly 11 p.m. She was clearly intoxicated and sounded confused when my mom asked about Aurora. Becky claimed that she had arranged for Aurora to go home with a friend after school, but when my mom asked for details, Becky couldn't remember which friend or provide any contact information. It turned out that Becky had gone to happy hour with Marcus and some coworkers and had completely lost track of time. She had turned her phone off because she didn't want to be bothered while she was out. She seemed genuinely surprised that the school had called my parents and couldn't understand why everyone was making such a big deal about Aurora staying late at school. My parents kept Aurora for the entire weekend because Becky said she had plans with Marcus and wouldn't be able to pick Aurora up until Monday. On Sunday evening, Becky called to say that she needed to extend her weekend plans and asked if Aurora could stay with my parents until Tuesday. When my mom asked what was so important that Becky couldn't collect her own daughter, Becky said that Marcus had invited her to go away for a couple of days and that this was important for their relationship. This was the final straw for my parents. My dad called Becky and told her that she needed to get her priorities straight and start acting like a responsible parent. He said that Aurora couldn't continue to be an afterthought in Becky's life and that her behavior was affecting Aurora's well-being and development. Becky's response was to become angry and defensive. She accused my parents of trying to turn Aurora against her and said that everyone was conspiring to make her look like a bad mother. She said that she was entitled to have a social life and that Aurora was fine staying with grandparents who actually wanted to spend time with her. The conversation escalated when my dad told Becky that her behavior reminded him of how our own father had prioritized drinking and socializing over his family responsibilities. This comparison infuriated Becky, who started screaming that she was nothing like our father and that everyone was being unfair to her. The call ended with Becky telling my parents that if they didn't approve of her parenting, they didn't have to be involved in Aurora's life. She said she would find other arrangements for Aurora and that my parents could go back to their perfect little lives without having to worry about her or her daughter. True to her word, Becky picked Aurora up on Tuesday and told my parents that they wouldn't be seeing Aurora anymore unless they apologized for interfering in her life. Since then, my parents have only seen Aurora once, when Becky dropped her off for a few hours while she went to a job interview. Even then, Becky made it clear that this was a one-time exception and that my parents shouldn't expect regular contact with Aurora anymore. The most concerning development happened 2 weeks ago when I ran into Aurora at a grocery store. She was with a woman I didn't recognize, who introduced herself as Jessica, 35F, one of Becky's co-workers. Jessica explained that she was watching Aurora while Becky was out of town for the weekend with Marcus. I asked Aurora how she was doing, and she said she was okay but seemed subdued. When I asked if she was staying with Jessica for the whole weekend, Aurora nodded and said that her mom went on trips sometimes and that different people watched her when that happened. The casual way Aurora talked about being left with various acquaintances was deeply troubling. Jessica seemed uncomfortable with my questions and quickly ended the conversation, saying they needed to finish shopping and get home. But before they left, Aurora asked me if I was still mad at her mom. When I told her that I wasn't mad at her mom but was worried about her, Aurora said that her mom had told her that Uncle Andrew didn't want to see them anymore because he didn't like the way her mom took care of her. This conversation made me realize that Becky has been manipulating Aurora's understanding of the family conflict. Instead of taking responsibility for her actions, Becky has been telling Aurora that the family rejection is about other people's problems with her parenting, not about Becky's actual behavior. I've tried reaching out to Becky multiple times since then, but she's blocked my number and won't respond to messages through other family members. She's also blocked my parents and several other relatives on social media and has been posting about toxic family members who don't support her happiness. The situation has left me feeling helpless. Aurora is clearly suffering from her mother's neglect and instability, but Becky has isolated herself and Aurora from the family members who could provide support and stability. I'm worried about Aurora's safety and well-being, but I don't know what legal options are available or whether involving authorities would make things better or worse for Aurora. My parents are heartbroken about losing contact with Aurora, and the whole family is struggling with how to handle the situation. Some relatives think we should respect Becky's wishes and stay out of her business, while others believe we have an obligation to intervene for Aurora's sake. The wedding incident that started this whole conflict now seems like a minor issue compared to the pattern of neglect and instability that has emerged. I don't regret my actions that night, but I do regret that the family conflict has made it harder for us to support Aurora during what is clearly a difficult time in her life. Update 3. This will be my final update on this situation, and I wanted to share what has happened since my last post because many people have been asking for closure on Aurora's story. About 6 weeks after my last update, I received an unexpected phone call from Aurora's school principal. She explained that the school had been monitoring Aurora's situation closely due to the ongoing attendance and behavioral concerns, and they had decided to make a formal report to Child Protective Services. The principal told me that Aurora had missed 23 days of school in the current semester, which was nearly half the school year. Aurora had also been consistently late on the days she did attend, often arriving hungry and in clothes that hadn't been washed. The school had documented multiple instances of Aurora falling asleep in class and several occasions where she had asked the cafeteria staff if she could take extra food home. The breaking point came when Aurora told her teacher that she had been staying alone overnight because her mom was visiting her boyfriend in another city. Aurora had mentioned this casually during a class discussion about weekend activities, not realizing that 8-year-olds shouldn't be left alone overnight. The teacher immediately reported this to the school administration. CPS conducted their initial investigation within 48 hours of receiving the school's report. They attempted to contact Becky multiple times but were unable to reach her. When they finally tracked her down, she was indeed out of town with Marcus and had left Aurora with a neighbor who barely knew Aurora and had no emergency contact information. The CPS worker found Aurora staying with this neighbor, who admitted that she had only agreed to watch Aurora for one night but Becky had been gone for 3 days with no communication. The neighbor was clearly overwhelmed and relieved when CPS arrived, saying she had been worried about the situation but didn't know who to contact. Becky was given 24 hours to return and meet with CPS, but she initially refused, saying she was on vacation and that the investigation was harassment. It was only when CPS explained that Aurora would be placed in emergency foster care if Becky didn't return immediately that she finally came back. The CPS investigation revealed a living situation that was much worse than any of us had realized. Becky's apartment was cluttered and dirty, with spoiled food in the refrigerator and piles of unwashed laundry throughout the house. Aurora's bedroom had no clean clothes or bedding, and there was no food in the house that didn't require cooking skills beyond 8-year-olds' abilities. During their interview with Aurora, CPS learned that Aurora had been taking care of herself for significant periods over the past several months. Aurora described making herself cereal for dinner when there was no other food, doing her own laundry in the apartment complex's machines, and walking to school by herself when Becky overslept or wasn't home in the mornings. Aurora also told CPS about the various people she had stayed with when Becky went out of town, many of whom were strangers or casual acquaintances that Aurora had never met before. The CPS worker was particularly concerned about Aurora's matter-of-fact attitude toward these arrangements, noting that Aurora seemed to view chronic neglect as normal life circumstances. Becky's response to the CPS investigation was to blame everyone else involved. She accused the school of targeting her, claimed that CPS was overreacting to normal single-parent challenges, and insisted that Aurora was mature for her age and capable of handling more independence than most children. She also blamed our family for starting the investigation out of spite over the wedding incident. However, the evidence was overwhelming. CPS determined that Aurora was being neglected and was at risk of harm if she remained in Becky's care. They offered Becky a safety plan that would allow Aurora to stay with her if Becky agreed to parenting classes, regular home visits, and having a family member serve as a safety monitor. Becky refused the safety plan, saying she wouldn't submit to harassment and supervision from people who didn't understand her situation. She also refused to allow Aurora to stay with my parents or other family members, claiming that we were all biased against her and would turn Aurora against her. With no other options, CPS placed Aurora in temporary foster care while they worked to find a kinship placement. My parents immediately applied to become Aurora's kinship caregivers, and after background checks and home evaluations, Aurora was placed with them 2 weeks later. Aurora has been living with my parents for the past 3 months, and the change in her demeanor has been remarkable. She's attending school regularly, her grades have improved dramatically, and she's started participating in activities like soccer and art classes. She's gained weight and seems more relaxed and confident than I've seen her in years. The legal process has been complicated. Becky initially fought the placement and demanded that Aurora be returned to her care. However, she failed to complete any of the requirements that would have demonstrated her ability to provide adequate care. She missed multiple court hearings, didn't attend the required parenting classes, and continued to prioritize her relationship with Marcus over her responsibilities to Aurora. The final straw came when Becky was arrested for DUI while Aurora was supposed to be in her care during a supervised visit. Becky had picked Aurora up for a court-mandated visit but had been drinking beforehand. She was pulled over with Aurora in the car, and Aurora had to be picked up from the police station by my parents. After this incident, Becky's parental rights were terminated. She had the opportunity to appeal the decision, but she never followed through with the paperwork or showed up for the scheduled hearings. My parents have now been granted permanent custody of Aurora, and they're in the process of adopting her. Becky has essentially disappeared from Aurora's life. She moved to another state with Marcus about 6 weeks ago and hasn't contacted Aurora since. She left no forwarding address and blocked all family members on social media. Aurora occasionally asks about her mom, but she doesn't seem particularly upset about the lack of contact. If anything, she seems relieved to have stability and consistency in her life. Aurora has started calling my parents grandma and grandpa instead of their first names, and she's begun referring to their house as home. She's made friends at school and seems to be thriving in an environment where she knows she'll be fed, clothed, and cared for consistently. The situation has been difficult for my parents, who are now raising a child in their 60s, but they're committed to giving Aurora the stable home she needs. Our extended family has rallied around them, providing support and helping with Aurora's care and activities. As for me, I've become much more involved in Aurora's life. I pick her up from school twice a week, help with homework, and take her to soccer practice on Saturdays. She started opening up to me about what her life was like before, and while some of her stories are heartbreaking, I'm encouraged by how resilient she is and how well she's adapting to her new situation. Looking back on everything that's happened since the wedding, I don't regret calling security that night. What seemed like an overreaction at the time was actually the first step in a process that ultimately led to Aurora getting the care and stability she needed. If I hadn't spoken up, Aurora might have continued to suffer in silence while Becky's neglect escalated. The family relationships have largely healed, though some relatives still think the situation could have been handled differently. Most family members now acknowledge that Becky's behavior was problematic and that Aurora is better off in my parents' care. The few relatives who still defend Becky have had minimal contact with Aurora, so their opinions don't significantly impact her daily life. Aurora is now 9 years old and doing well in 4th grade. She's a happy, healthy child who loves art, soccer, and spending time with her friends. She rarely mentions Becky, and when she does, it's usually in a neutral, matter-of-fact way rather than with sadness or longing. This whole experience has taught me that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting that relationships will be damaged and that there may not be a way to maintain family harmony while also protecting someone who needs help. Aurora's well-being was more important than preserving my relationship with Becky or avoiding family conflict. I hope that sharing this story helps other people who might be in similar situations. Sometimes the adults who are supposed to protect children aren't doing their job, and it takes other family members or community members to step up and advocate for the child's safety. The wedding incident seems almost trivial now compared to everything that followed, but it was the catalyst that exposed a much larger problem. If you see a child being neglected or put in dangerous situations, trust your instincts and speak up. It might feel like you're causing trouble or interfering in family business, but children can't advocate for themselves and they need adults who are willing to prioritize their safety over social comfort. Aurora will never remember much about the chaos and instability of her early childhood, but she'll grow up knowing that she has people who love her and put her needs first. That's what matters most in the end. For anyone wondering about Becky, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she and Marcus broke up about 2 months after they moved away. I don't know where she is now or what she's doing, and honestly, I don't want to know. She made her choices, and Aurora is better off without the instability and neglect that Becky brought to her life. Aurora has a bright future ahead of her, and I'm grateful that our family was able to provide her with the safety and stability she deserved all along. Sometimes the hardest thing about doing the right thing is that it takes time to see that it was actually the right choice. But watching Aurora thrive in her new environment has confirmed that every difficult decision along the way was worth it. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My ex-wife poisoned my daughter against me for 12 years and kept her away from me. So, I lied about my mother's inheritance to see if my estranged daughter really wanted to reconnect. I'm Marvin, 52M, and I've been through a roller coaster of emotions these past 12 years. My ex-wife, Miranda, 50F, and I divorced after 18 years of marriage. It was a messy split that left me feeling betrayed and alone. The worst part? Our daughter, Aubrey, 26F, decided to cut all contact with me and sided with her mother. Let me give you some background. I grew up in a middle-class family in a small town. My parents worked hard to provide for me and my younger brother, Tom. They instilled in us the value of hard work and education. I was always good with numbers, so I decided to pursue accounting in college. That's where I met Miranda. Miranda was studying literature and dreamed of becoming a writer. She was vibrant, full of life, and had a way with words that captivated me. We were opposites in many ways, but we balanced each other out. I was the practical one, while she brought spontaneity and creativity into my life. We dated for 3 years before getting married at 24. It was a small ceremony in my parents' backyard, with just close family and friends. We were young and in love, ready to take on the world together. 2 years into our marriage, Aubrey was born. She was the light of our lives. I can still remember holding her for the first time, this tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. Miranda and I were overjoyed, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. I worked hard as an accountant, often putting in long hours to provide for my family. Miranda decided to be a stay-at-home mom, which we both agreed was best for Aubrey. She put her writing dreams on hold, saying she'd get back to them when Aubrey was older. As the years went by, I noticed changes in our relationship. Miranda became restless. She started talking about feeling unfulfilled, like she had lost herself in motherhood. I tried to be supportive, encouraging her to pursue her writing again. I even bought her a laptop for her birthday one year, hoping it would reignite her passion. But instead of writing, Miranda started going out more with her friends. She joined a book club, then a yoga class, then started taking art lessons. I was happy she was finding things she enjoyed, but it meant I was often left to take care of Aubrey when I got home from work. I didn't think much of it at first. I loved spending time with my daughter, helping her with homework, or just watching movies together. But as Aubrey got older, she started spending more time with her friends, and I found myself alone more often. That's when I started noticing other changes in Miranda. She was always on her phone, smiling at text messages, and being secretive. If I asked who she was talking to, she'd quickly say it was just her book club friends or her yoga instructor. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. I didn't want to be the jealous, suspicious husband. I trusted Miranda. We had been together for so long, I couldn't imagine her betraying that trust. But then came that fateful day. I had a migraine and decided to leave work early. I didn't call ahead because I thought I'd surprise Miranda and maybe we could have a quiet afternoon together while Aubrey was at school. When I walked into our bedroom, I found Miranda with another man. It was like my whole world came crashing down. The man, who I later learned was her art instructor, quickly left. Miranda broke down crying, begging me to let her explain. Through her tears, she admitted to having multiple affairs over the past few years. She said she felt neglected because of my long work hours and found comfort elsewhere. She claimed she still loved me but wasn't in love with me anymore. I was devastated. All those years of hard work, of building a life together, seemed to crumble in an instant. I couldn't bear to stay in the house, so I packed a bag and went to stay with my brother, Tom. The next few weeks were a blur. I filed for divorce, and that's when things got really ugly. Miranda hired a cutthroat lawyer who tried to paint me as an absent, uncaring father. They argued that because I worked long hours, I wasn't involved in Aubrey's life and that Miranda deserved full custody. I fought hard. I had witnesses testify about how involved I was in Aubrey's life despite my work schedule. I had records of every school event I attended, every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's appointment. In the end, we got joint custody. But the damage was done. Aubrey, who was 14 at the time, had heard all the accusations thrown around during the divorce proceedings. Miranda had gotten to her, filling her head with stories about how I didn't care about them, how I chose work over family. I tried to maintain a relationship with Aubrey, but she was angry and hurt. She refused to listen to my side of the story. Every time I tried to explain, she'd accuse me of trying to turn her against her mother. Eventually, she stopped responding to my calls and messages altogether. Losing Aubrey was harder than the divorce itself. She was my little girl, the one who used to run to me with skinned knees for me to kiss better, the one who'd beg me to read her just one more bedtime story. And now, she wanted nothing to do with me. After the divorce, I threw myself into work. I got promoted to senior accountant and bought a small house. I dated casually but never could bring myself to fully trust anyone again. The betrayal from Miranda had left deep scars. The only family I had left was my mom. She had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's shortly after my divorce. It was hard seeing the woman who had always been my rock slowly slipping away. But caring for her gave me a sense of purpose. For the past 7 years, I've been juggling my career and taking care of my mom. It's been tough, but it's also been rewarding in its own way. I've learned patience and compassion in ways I never knew I could. During this time, I tried reaching out to Aubrey a few times, especially when my mom's condition worsened. I thought maybe she'd want to see her grandmother before it was too late. But my messages went unanswered. My mom passed away 3 months ago. It was a difficult time, and I felt more alone than ever. The funeral was small, just me, Tom, and a few close friends. Aubrey didn't come, and I didn't expect her to. I inherited my mom's house and some savings, which turned out to be a substantial amount due to my grandfather's smart investments. Now, here's where things get complicated. Last week, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. It was Aubrey. She said she saw on Facebook that her grandmother had passed away and wanted to check on me. I was shocked and emotional. We talked for a bit, and she suggested meeting up. I was over the moon. I thought this was my chance to reconnect with my daughter and maybe even rebuild our relationship. We agreed to meet at a local cafe over the weekend. When I saw Aubrey, I barely recognized her. The teenager I remembered had grown into a beautiful young woman. We talked about her life. She's working as a teacher now and engaged to be married. I told her about my work and taking care of Grandma. It was a bit awkward at first, but I felt we were making progress. Then, Aubrey dropped the bomb. She said she was reaching out because she thought there might be an inheritance from her grandmother, and she could use some financial help with her upcoming wedding. I was stunned. All this time, I thought she genuinely wanted to reconnect, but it seemed like she was only after money. I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to give her whatever she wanted just to keep her in my life. But another part felt hurt and used. I told her I needed time to think about it and would get back to her. Now, I'm torn. Should I give Aubrey part of the inheritance to maintain a relationship with her? Or should I stand my ground and risk losing her again? I don't want to be used, but I also don't want to lose my only child. Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. Thank you all for your responses. Your advice and perspectives have given me a lot to think about. I wanted to give you an update on what's happened since my last post. After much contemplation, I decided to meet with Aubrey again. I felt I needed to have an honest conversation with her about my feelings and concerns. We met at the same cafe, and this time, I was determined to get to the bottom of her intentions. Before I dive into what happened at our meeting, let me give you some more context about my relationship with Aubrey before the divorce. When she was little, we were inseparable. I'd come home from work, no matter how tired I was, and we'd have our special daddy-daughter time. We'd build pillow forts, have tea parties with her stuffed animals, or just sit and color together. As she grew older, our bond remained strong. I coached her soccer team when she was 10, despite knowing next to nothing about the sport. I stayed up late helping her with science fair projects. I was the one who taught her to ride a bike, who held her hand on her first day of middle school when she was nervous about making new friends. That's why it hurt so much when she cut me out of her life after the divorce. It felt like all those years, all those memories, meant nothing to her. So, when we met at the cafe, all these memories were swirling in my mind. I started by telling Aubrey how hurt I was that she only reached out after learning about the potential inheritance. I explained that I had tried to contact her multiple times over the years, especially when her grandmother's health was declining. I showed her the unanswered text messages and emails I had sent. There were birthday wishes, Christmas greetings, and even a long email I had sent on her 18th birthday, pouring my heart out and asking for a chance to explain my side of the story. Aubrey seemed taken aback. She admitted that she had blocked my number years ago at her mother's insistence and hadn't seen any of my attempts to reach out. She said she regretted not giving me a chance to explain my side of the story during the divorce and acknowledged that she had been manipulated by Miranda's version of events. She told me about how, in the years following the divorce, Miranda had painted me as the villain. According to Miranda, I had chosen my career over my family, neglected them, and the affairs were just a symptom of a larger problem. Aubrey, hurt and confused, had believed her mother without question. However, Aubrey also defended her actions, saying that she was young and confused at the time of the divorce. She insisted that reaching out now wasn't just about the money, but also about wanting to reconnect. She said she had been thinking about contacting me for years but was afraid I wouldn't forgive her. I listened to her explanations, trying to understand her perspective. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the timing of her reappearance was too convenient. I decided to be direct and asked her what she would do if there was no inheritance. Aubrey hesitated before saying that she still wanted to try and rebuild our relationship, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. It was clear that the prospect of financial help had been a significant motivator in her reaching out. At that point, I made a decision. I told Aubrey that while I was happy she reached out, I needed time to process everything. I explained that the inheritance was currently tied up in legal proceedings, a white lie, and that it would take some time before anything could be distributed. I said I would be open to working on our relationship in the meantime, without the pressure of financial expectations. Aubrey seemed conflicted but agreed. We parted ways with a tentative plan to meet again in a few weeks. After our meeting, I received a flurry of text messages from Miranda. Apparently, Aubrey had told her about our conversations. Miranda accused me of being selfish and trying to punish Aubrey for the past. She demanded that I do the right thing and give Aubrey her share of the inheritance. Reading Miranda's messages brought back a flood of memories from our marriage. I remembered how she used to manipulate situations to get her way, how she would twist my words and actions to fit her narrative. It felt like history repeating itself. I was furious. It was clear that Miranda was still trying to control the situation, still trying to paint me as the bad guy. I didn't respond to her messages, choosing instead to block her number. Now, I'm left wondering if I made the right decision. Part of me hopes that by removing the immediate prospect of money, I can see if Aubrey genuinely wants a relationship with me. But another part fears that I'm setting myself up for more heartbreak. I've decided to take some time for myself before making any final decisions. I'm planning a solo trip to the mountains, a place my dad used to take me and Tom camping when we were kids. I hope that being in nature, away from the chaos of everyday life, will help me gain some perspective. When I return, I'll reassess the situation and decide how to move forward with Aubrey. I want to believe that the little girl who used to look at me like I hung the moon is still in there somewhere. But I also need to protect myself from being hurt again. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It means more than you know to have people to talk to about this. I'll update you again when I return from my trip. Update 2. Hello everyone. I'm back with another update, and things have taken an unexpected turn. I returned from my solo trip to the mountains feeling refreshed and more clear-headed. The time alone in nature, surrounded by the peace and quiet of the wilderness, gave me the space I needed to process everything that had happened. I thought about my relationship with Aubrey, from her childhood to her current situation, and tried to see things from her perspective. I remembered a camping trip I took with Aubrey when she was 12, just a couple of years before the divorce. We had hiked to a beautiful lake, and as we sat by the campfire that night, Aubrey had confided in me about her fears of growing up, of changing schools, of not fitting in. I had reassured her, telling her that no matter what changes life brought, I would always be there for her. The irony of that promise, given our current situation, wasn't lost on me. After much reflection, I had decided to give Aubrey one more chance to prove that she wanted a relationship with me, regardless of any potential inheritance. I was prepared to have a frank discussion with her about my expectations and boundaries. However, before I could reach out to Aubrey, I received a surprising email from her. In it, she apologized for her behavior and admitted that she had initially reached out with the intention of securing some financial help for her wedding. She said that our conversations and seeing the evidence of my attempts to contact her over the years had made her realize how much she had missed out on. Aubrey explained that she had a long talk with her fiancé, Mark, 28M, about the situation. She said Mark encouraged her to be honest with me and to try to rebuild our relationship without any financial motivations. She also shared that Mark had lost his own father to cancer a few years ago, and he didn't want Aubrey to miss the opportunity to have a relationship with her dad. I was cautiously optimistic about this development. It seemed like Aubrey had done some soul-searching of her own. I replied to her email, thanking her for her honesty and suggesting we meet again to talk things through. We agreed to meet at a local park this time, a place where I used to take Aubrey to feed the ducks when she was little. Aubrey brought Mark along, which I appreciated. It showed me that she was serious about including me in her life. As we walked through the park, memories flooded back. I could almost see the ghost of a little Aubrey running ahead of me on the path, her pigtails bouncing as she laughed. It was bittersweet, thinking of all the years we had lost. We had a long, emotional conversation where Aubrey opened up about her feelings during and after the divorce. She admitted that she had believed her mother's version of events without question and regretted not giving me a chance to explain my side. She told me about the confusion and anger she felt as a teenager, and how she had channeled all of that into blaming me. I shared my own experiences and the pain of losing her. I told her about the countless nights I had spent staring at her picture, wondering what she was doing, if she was happy, if she ever thought about me. We both shed some tears, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly connecting with my daughter. Mark seemed like a good guy. He was supportive of Aubrey but also respectful towards me. He even apologized for their initial approach regarding the inheritance, saying it was his idea because they were struggling with wedding expenses. He explained that he had lost his job due to company downsizing and they were trying to cut costs wherever they could. At the end of our meeting, Aubrey invited me to her wedding. She made it clear that this invitation wasn't contingent on any financial support, but rather because she wanted me there as her father. She even tentatively asked if I would consider walking her down the aisle, though she said she would understand if I wasn't comfortable with that yet. I was touched by the gesture, but I told them I needed some time to think about it. While I was happy with the progress we'd made, I was still wary of getting hurt again. The wounds from the past 12 years weren't going to heal overnight. After they left, I received another series of angry messages from Miranda. She had found out about our meeting and was furious that I was manipulating Aubrey. She threatened to tell Aubrey the truth about why I was really absent during her childhood. I'm not sure what truth Miranda is referring to, but it's clear she's not happy about Aubrey and I reconnecting. I'm worried about what she might do or say to sabotage our fragile new relationship. It brings back memories of how Miranda used to pit Aubrey against me during the divorce, and I fear history might repeat itself. So now, I'm at a crossroads. Do I accept Aubrey's invitation and try to move forward, knowing that Miranda might try to interfere? Or do I protect myself and maintain some distance? I'm leaning towards giving it a chance, but I'm still unsure. The idea of walking Aubrey down the aisle brings up a mix of emotions. On one hand, it's something I've dreamed about since she was little. On the other hand, I'm afraid of getting my hopes up only to be disappointed again. I'd appreciate any thoughts or advice you might have. Thank you all for your continued support through this emotional journey. Update 3. Hello everyone. I have what might be my final update on this situation. After much consideration, I decided to accept Aubrey's invitation to her wedding. I felt that if I was ever going to have a relationship with my daughter again, I needed to take this chance. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a mix of excitement and anxiety. Aubrey and I had several more meetings, sometimes with Mark present, sometimes just the two of us. We talked about the past, cleared up misunderstandings, and started to rebuild our bond. It wasn't always easy, but it felt genuine. We revisited old memories, both good and bad. Aubrey told me about her first day of high school, how she had wished I was there to see her off. I shared stories about her early childhood that she didn't remember, like how she used to insist on wearing her princess costume to the grocery store. These conversations were healing, but they also highlighted how much we had missed out on. There were so many milestones in Aubrey's life that I hadn't been a part of: her high school graduation, her college years, her first job. It was bittersweet to hear about these events, but I was grateful she was willing to share them with me now. However, true to form, Miranda tried to cause problems. A week before the wedding, she sent Aubrey a long email filled with accusations about me. She claimed that I had been unfaithful during our marriage, that I had neglected Aubrey on purpose, and that I was only pretending to care now because of guilt. Thankfully, Aubrey came to me with the email instead of believing it outright. We had a long, emotional conversation where I was able to refute Miranda's claims with evidence, old emails, testimonies from mutual friends, and even some old home videos that showed a different picture than what Miranda was painting. Aubrey was upset with her mother's attempts to manipulate her again. She made the difficult decision to uninvite Miranda from the wedding. It wasn't an easy choice for her, but she felt it was necessary to break free from her mother's toxic influence. The wedding day arrived, and it was beautiful. Seeing Aubrey in her wedding dress brought tears to my eyes. It reminded me of the day she was born, how tiny and perfect she had been. Now here she was, all grown up and starting a new chapter of her life. In the end, Aubrey asked both me and her Uncle Tom to walk her down the aisle. It was a compromise that felt right, acknowledging both her past and her hopes for the future. As we walked towards Mark, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. During the reception, Aubrey and Mark surprised me. They announced that they didn't want any wedding gifts, but instead asked guests to donate to an Alzheimer's research charity in memory of my mother. I was deeply touched by this gesture. It showed me that Aubrey truly wanted to be a part of my life, including honoring the grandmother she hadn't seen in years. After the wedding, Aubrey and I had a heart-to-heart. She apologized again for her initial motives in reaching out and thanked me for giving her another chance. I told her that while we can't erase the past, I'm looking forward to being part of her future. We've made plans to meet regularly and are even talking about a family trip with Mark next summer. It's still early days, and we're taking things slowly, but I feel cautiously optimistic about our relationship. As for the inheritance issue, I've decided to set up a trust fund for Aubrey's future children, my potential grandchildren. This way, I can ensure the money is used for their education and well-being, rather than it being a source of conflict between us. Miranda has tried to contact both of us several times since the wedding, but we've both decided to maintain no contact with her for now. It's not an easy situation, but it feels like the healthiest choice for all of us. Thank you all for your support and advice throughout this journey. While things aren't perfect, I feel like I've got my daughter back, and that's worth more than any inheritance.